Hello, welcome to our webinar on developing EU MDR compliant stainless steels for medical devices. I'm Dan Cook with BoneZone, and presenting today are Gaurav Lawani and Raymond Dufresne from Carpenter Technology. They will provide a comprehensive understanding of metal allergies, regulatory changes, material advances, and alternative alloys for manufacturing stainless steels that can revolutionize medical device manufacturing. Before we get started, I would like to say a few words about Carpenter Technology. The company offers a diverse portfolio of titanium, cobalt, and steel-based material solutions for medical devices and has achieved numerous recent product development and enhancements specific to the European market. Carpenter Technology's additive manufacturing business unit, Carpenter Additive, provides manufacturing solutions that include alloy development, powder atomization, and complete traceability to accelerate development in this space. We appreciate their sponsorship of this webinar. One final note before we get started. The presenters will take questions after their discussion. Attendees, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your inquiries. With that, I'd like to hand over to Gaurav Lawani of Carpenter Technology.
Thank you, Dan, for the introduction. I'll quickly start by introducing myself. My name is Gaurav. I work with Carpenter Technology as a global business development executive and a strategic application management lead for the medical business unit. Been with the company for about 5.5 years now. I have a background by medical engineering. And our speaker, Ray, today also has a really deep background in metallurgy. He serves as the regional metallurgy lead for our medical business unit as well. And he manages a lot of new product development and enhancement processes and is the boots on the ground for all the technical support for our contract manufacturers and medical device OEMs. So we'll quickly start off with a company overview. Carpenter Technology is a 130-year-old metallurgical powerhouse. The company started as a specialty steel producer and gradually over the years has transitioned itself into becoming a producer of metals across different alloy families. And today we essentially offer high performance material solutions for essentially critical applications across several different industry segments. And we produce a lot of new products and new manufacturing processes as well. Our vision is to essentially be a preferred material solutions provider with a reputation for really high quality, zero injuries, really focused on growth and technology. And we really embrace the challenge of providing material solutions for critical never fail components in the supply chain. We have a global presence. We have more than 4,000 employees. We have about more than 200 metallurgists on staff, sales offices and manufacturing hubs located all across the world. So we can really service the entire global supply chain. We serve 7 strategic end markets, aerospace and medical being the top 2 markets that we serve, along with automotive, energy, consumer, defense, and industrials. And we also support additive manufacturing and electrification with soft MAGA applications. We are about $2.5 billion in global revenue, and we have a portfolio of about 500 plus high-performance alloys and custom applications. We produce several different alloy forms and several different alloy families, starting from stainless steels to nickel-based alloys, cobalt-based super alloys, titanium alloys in all different product forms, bar, shapes, wire, coil, precision wire. And a quick slide on our core values. You can see our core values. We really define us in every step we take to meet and produce materials for our customers. So let's get into the meat of our discussion today on this webinar, which is focused on EU MDR regulatory changes and how Carpenter is providing material solutions for these changing regulatory applications. So essentially, what is EU MDR and how does it differ from EU MDD? So let's start off with that so that we can provide a perspective of how the regulations, especially in the European region, have changed over the last few years. So the EU MDD that we all are essentially familiar with is the European Union Medical Device Directive. And it's an older regulatory requirement that was essentially established in 1994 timeframe. It covered pretty much all of the medical devices that were sold in Europe, along with softwares. And this is the first time that software products were included in a medical device directive. And the primary focus of the EU MDD regulation was to essentially govern how OEMs advertise their products to the end consumers, and which essentially was focused on pretty much making sure that the OEMs have a compliant CE mark. And beyond that, EU MDD really did not have any additional scope in terms of its regulatory oversight. And then there was a change in regulation, and in 2007, EU MDR was introduced. EU MDR essentially is, short for European Union Medical Device Regulation, and that was a step change in how the European Union governed medical devices. So in the past, in addition to just CE marking, they updated and started encompassing additional qualifications to essentially broaden their oversight. The EU MDR regulation, which was introduced in 2007, was then subsequently updated in 2017. And that is the time when, during that update, special new provisions were passed by the Parliament, which essentially included updated classification of medical devices. They started a new, unique identifying system so that they can track the medical devices for clinical evaluations, post-market surveillance. And then they also implemented new classification and labeling rules for elements and compounds. Now, they have been classifying and having rules and regulations in place for several compounds and elements that are commonly used for medical device production. But in this instance, in 2017, there was a unanimous vote to essentially upregulate or upclassify cobalt to a class 2 RMR component, which essentially means that cobalt or cobalt containing devices will have a much tighter scrutiny. And the reason why that happened was essentially, if we go back and look at the background and the physiological landscape of why that change was essentially affected, we see that more than 15% of general population is sensitive to nickel and cobalt. So there is a growing concern with respect to metal allergies. And cobalt being one of the elements, again, is a point of concern, especially when it leaches out from a medical device, which has been shown and reported to lead to severe complications, implant loosening, metal allergies, hypersensitivity reactions, and additional complications that require revision surgeries. So there was this whole concern about cobalt being leached out and elemental cobalt causing significant complications, which led to more scrutiny with respect to cobalt content in medical devices. Now, the 2017 regulatory change, especially with respect to cobalt, said that cobalt is going to be upclassified as a CMR component, right? Which essentially is a short formed for carcinogen, mutagen, and reproductive toxin. And all medical devices containing more than 0.1% cobalt will need to include a warning label. All the medical OEMs that plan to continue using cobalt-based alloys will need to essentially justify the use of cobalt and justify a continued use of cobalt. And as a result, several stainless steel alloys that were commonly used in the medical device industry, alloys, 300 series stainless, 400 series stainless alloys, custom 465, custom 455, several of these alloys that have a long history of successful use were impacted because inherently these alloys can contain anywhere up to 0.4% cobalt, just based on the presence of cobalt as an interstitial element during the melt practices, essentially making majority of the stainless alloys that are used in medical device industry non-compliant for EU MDR. So we'll talk about how Carpenter is looking at this unmet need in the market and what we are doing to essentially produce stainless steel alloys that comply with EU MDR and additional new products that we have coming out that meet the EU MDR regulation for medical devices. With that, I would pass it on to our expert, Ray, to hop on and drive the next few slides. Ray.
Perfect. Thank you, Gaurav. And good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those abroad. Once again, thank you for joining the webinar. So my name is Ray Dufresne, and I am the boots on the ground field metallurgist for Carpenter. I work directly with the medical customers that Carpenter serves, and I have the pleasure to provide the remainder of the presentation today. Without any further ado, we're going to get into that technical portion. So specifically, we're going to talk about some of Carpenter's solutions to the changing regulations coming out of Europe and some of the manufacturing processes that we use to make that possible. So as Gaurav points out, EU MDR is coming, and for many of us, it's already here. We recently learned together that some of the extensions in the mandate have been outlined, but really the extension is only for folks that have submitted components already, and that the extension is just to allow for additional data gathering. So for those of you concerned with EU MDR compliance, the time is now. And really this presentation is to talk about some of the Carpenter solutions that can cross both implant and instrumentation that we're going to have listed here, along with a few additional slides. And we'll go through each of these in a moment. But before we do so, I'd like to take a moment to chat about melting. So the importance of melt technology cannot be overstated. It's the foundation of consistency in our production, in machining, and performance in your final component. So in addition to these foundational performance pillars of medical and the medical market, it allows, in some cases, to push to higher alloy contents and higher alloyed materials, such as the custom 465 that Gaurav pointed to a moment ago, as well as some of our high-strength super alloys, or provides the ability to do some really unique things like dispersion strengthening in the CCM alloy 3, for example, in the most unique of cases. Routinely at Carpenter, we leverage our melt capabilities to drive consistency throughout many of the products that we produce, and it allows us to generate new families of alloys, such as the Project 70 Plus blends in some of our stainlesses, and the performance boosts that we're now expected to produce through our custom 465 and the sub-variants of custom 465 that I'll talk about in a few moments. Carpenter technology, for some of you may be very familiar with, some of you on the phone may not be familiar with what we produce, but ultimately we produce high-performing materials today and have linkages to the market, such as the medical market in this case, to understand the challenges and changes that we hear from our customers to leverage breakthroughs and to fill and support gaps for tomorrow's need. Now, when we do that, we need to do that in special ways. And again, from a melt perspective, oftentimes that's leveraging premium melt capacity and melt capabilities. As Gaurav indicated earlier, cobalt is not immediately an eliminated element in many of the products that we produce, as it likes to come along for the ride whenever there are nickel contents within products. And many of the stainless steels that the medical market has worked with over the years leverages nickel to drive corrosion resistance and austenitic stability. So there are some unique ways that carpenters come up with to support both that stability and the reduction of the cobalt content in the alloys we're going to talk about today. So first in the lineup is a quick comparison of materials. When we think of implant stainlesses, and this slide is going to specifically talk about implant, most of our minds go to 316 LVM, or as Carpenter calls it, Biodor 316 LS. 316 LS is an alloy that's now the de facto quote-unquote cobalt-free material and is required, at least in the latest version of the ASTM specification, which is either F138 or F139, to be cobalt restricted. However, this was not always the case. In previous years, Biodor 734 and Biodor 108 were alloy developments to tackle metallic concerns while also addressing some strength improvement requirements well before the changes that ASTM had adopted for the EU MDR. Now, before we go any further, I just want to take a moment to explain why we're going to be talking about these particular alloys here and the alloys in the following slides. So first of all, it's been reported in both MedTech 2023, which occurred in Nuremberg, Germany, and reiterated again in OMTech Chicago, that 50% of the medical device manufacturing is being deprioritized out of Europe, and that 50% of R&D and innovation in Europe is postponed or being shifted out of Europe. So that means if innovation is to continue, it will likely continue through other regulatory infrastructures, such as the FDA, for example. If this is the case, it would not be unexpected for contract manufacturers, many of which may be on the phone right now, non-European OEMs, which may be on the phone right now, and tiered suppliers to be working with different materials, as non-European areas serve to be the quote-unquote testing platform for innovation. This means that we have an opportunity together for innovation and an opportunity to work with advanced solutions and really prepare for some of the materials that are going to be coming your way. So in the next few slides, we're going to be talking about some of these material innovations that will likely be included in both implant and instrumentation innovations as we collectively respond to the changes brought on by the EU MDR. Biodor 734 was actually one of the materials that was developed out of Europe. And that was a growing need for higher strength 316 LS. Biodor 734 provides improved strength, fatigue, and corrosion resistance above 316 LVM. Now, this particular material is covered under the ASTM 1586 spec and is certainly available to the global audience, but again, finds its roots and most of its use out of Europe. Again, so for those of you unfamiliar with this material, it may be something to review. And just as a few quick side comments here, these slides will be available after the presentation. And of course, the data sheets for any of the alloys that I listed are going to be available on Carpenter's website. Lastly, the data that we're showing in this presentation are typical values and certainly aren't a guarantee of fit of use or fit for function. So just a quick disclaimer there. So we talked a bit about Biodor 108, and in that slide with its comparison to 316, it's targeted low nickel content and low cobalt content. But I need to tell you a bit about some of its strength capabilities because it really is quite amazing compared to the 316. This particular alloy I consider as the big brother to 316 LVM stainless, and it allows for increased strength through cold work because it is a purely austenitic material. And it essentially has 0 nickel content and 0 cobalt. And in its powder form, it has printability for additive manufacturing. So something pretty unique about the product. As Gaurav mentioned earlier, nickel sensitivity in the United States is estimated between 12 and 15% for the Center of Devices and Radiological Health. And exposure to that nickel is could become from normal wear and tear of medical implants, and that can lead to adverse side effects. With Biodor 108, we can collectively offer implant materials that have both producibility and workability similar to a 316 LVM, but without the concern of cobalt and nickel contents. Biodor 108 offers strength capabilities of 200 plus KSI. It's also an implantable stainless. So not only are we talking a bit about a 316 LVM upgrade, but in some cases, it's now being considered as an alternative to CCM based off of its performance, strength, corrosion resistance, and fatigue capability. So something else to be considered. So shifting away from implants and into next generation instrumentation alloys, we find ourselves at the gold standard for high strength and high corrosion resistance in a high toughness pH stainless. Couple things to mention on this slide. Number one, we're talking about custom 465. And the first thing I need to comment is we do have a variant of 465 with restricted cobalt, right? That's why it's in this presentation. But one very important thing that I wanted to make sure I included in this presentation was the fact of the cold work capability of this product. And many OEMs have explored the use of custom 465 over the years, leveraging its amazing strength and its toughness combination for various medical instrumentation applications. But personally, I speak with engineers quite often that are looking for a bump in strength, but may not be familiar with the benefits of this material when it's provided in a cold worked condition, or cold work and then finally aged condition, I should say. Custom 465 has been supplied in the cold work condition, ready for a single stage aging treatment for a very long time. But as of 2019, we also lobbied to have it added to the ASTM A564. So just from a communication standpoint, the ASTM A564 revision 19A includes the condition for specifically calling out cold worked for this particular product. So I would encourage you and your team to explore the benefits of the cold work condition for 465 as you potentially look at design changes and design criteria, leveraging in the cobalt restriction and seeing here on the slide that you can approach over 300 KSI in your instrumentation or design. So we talked about 465, and many of you may not be aware that there's a sub-variant of this alloy called Custom 470. This alloy provides very similar characteristics. It's a standard blend of Custom 465, but it maximizes toughness, minimizes grain size, and enhances machinability by providing this product in a powder-borne process. So in other words, this is born as a powder and we consolidate that into the wrought form. We did tweak the chemistry slightly, and we produced that product through the powdered melt technology, as I mentioned, and then we hot roll that product into a wrought bar product for the similar applications that you work with. A21. This is an alloy that many of you may not have heard of. This is the newest addition to the Carpenter's product portfolio. A21 is a pretty neat alloy that I'm very excited about. This alloy was invented at Carpenter in the very recent years. It's an absolutely new to world, truly stainless bearing material. So you can think of that as a highly corrosion resistant 9310 or 440 stainless, for example. This particular product is capable of greater than 62 HRC case hardness when we carburize it. And there are a few different methodologies, as you see on the screen, to be able to work with this material and attain very high hardnesses. You'll see visual comparisons of the product on the right-hand side after 200 hours of the D117 salt spray exposure compared with the results of a CPM S90V and the traditional 440C. This particular alloy is not covered in the ASTM F899 specification, but we're actively looking for partners interested in trialing this material as we work towards its inclusion in the industry spec. So if anyone's interested in discussing this cobalt restricted EU MDR compliant, truly stainless, high hardness and corrosion resistant alloy, and you're looking to get a little bit more detail, feel free to reach out to me direct, or if you like, we can set up and schedule a more in-depth presentation with the inventor of this alloy, Dr. Buck. As I said a few slides ago, melt technology is incredibly important, but so is working direct with the market folks such as yourself and working with our research and development team to offer solutions to a wide array of challenges. Now, Gaurav had mentioned we offer 500 plus alloys. Well, behind the scenes, Carpenter offers 2,000 different alloys because we have so many different sub-variants of many of the alloys that we support. 2,000 different alloys in our portfolio, albeit I give you a very small snapshot of some of the alloys we talked about in the space for medical instrumentations today. Just quickly showing a comparison here where we look at corrosion resistant performance versus strength and where some of these alloys exist to be able to support both the application and design criteria as we move into the future. As you continue to innovate in your sector, Carpenter is certainly willing to work with you, happy to work with you on developing the next advanced material to support your design or work towards the regulatory challenges we all work with together. Ultimately, we want to work together with you to partner and improve patient outcomes and support regulatory challenges. I appreciate the attention today, and we look forward to any questions you may have.
All right, I think we have several questions coming in, so let's take them one at a time. The first question is, you mentioned A21 as a stainless material, but how does it compare to 440A or custom 465 for corrosion resistance? Ray, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So could you repeat the question, Gaurav? I didn't hear it properly.
Sure. It's essentially, so, we're talking about A21 as a stainless material, right? But how does the corrosion resistance compare to, something like 440A or 465? Sure.
So A21, it's a really unique material. Again, it's new to world. Its corrosion resistance is improved over the standard wrought martensitic stainlesses. Think of the 440A, the 440C. 420 has so many different variants out there, 420 modifications, and it would be in the realm of a 420, probably sitting in between a 420 and a 440A when we talk about corrosion resistance. But as far as impact and toughness and hardness capability, which speaks to yield, it would be above the alloys I just mentioned. It would not compare against a 300 series stainless or a pH stainless with respect to corrosion resistance capabilities. Again, but it does offer some really significant improvements when we talk about wear resistance, hardness, and strength. So again, a high strength, high hardness 420 or a super corrosion resistant 440. That's where I would put that mentally.
Yeah, and another question, Ray, on the A21 topic, could you also highlight some applications for A21?
Absolutely. So when we talk about the straight martensitic materials, right? So we're talking about 410, 420, 440. There's been so many alloy developments on that particular alloy system over the years. I mean, even as simple as going to Bed Bath & Beyond and buying a piece of cutlery, right? There are so many options that you can purchase. Some of those provide very good edge retention, right? Some people choose to even work with carbon steels when we talk about edge retention, but there's been this long-standing balance of corrosion resistance versus strength, hardness, wear resistance, and they seem to always be competing attributes. A21 really kind of is the first time as a metallurgist that has been broken down. Historically, a straight martensitic stainless has been a material that leverages carbide precipitates within the stainless matrix, right? And those carbides provide the wear resistance. However, we have historically leveraged out the chromium that provides the corrosion resistance for these alloys by creating chrome carbides. In A21, we stabilized the material. So we're not stealing the chrome, right? We're doing it a different way to maintain that corrosion resistant matrix within the material, while at the same time creating those carbides to make them very, very hard and provide the wear resistance. So from an application standpoint, we think of materials and applications where we need corrosion resistance and we need wear resistance. So edge products, right? We think of knives, blades, cutlery, right? And we think of corrosion resistant situations where maybe we want a knife that will go in the dishwasher, right? Like my example from the Bed Bath & Beyond, right? Oftentimes they say hand wash only. A21 could be an example of a material that would survive autoclaves much better, survive dishwashers and some of the detergents that are used without the corrosion resistant challenges that we see. Applications for marine environments where we need sharp wear resistant products, but that are subjected to environmental corrosion concerns. And certainly many of the medical instrumentations where we have an edge, a cutting tool, whether we talk about maybe drills and drivers that have edge and wear resistant needs and need high strength, but require toughness and are concerned about wear, yet need corrosion resistance. There are many applications in the medical market and in other industries where the balance between wear and edge and corrosion resistance have been challenged over the years. And I think there's a myriad of applications where this alloy could really shine.
Great. The next question is, you mentioned Carpenter's additive capabilities with respect to powder production. Could you elaborate on that? What does that mean? Does Carpenter have the capability to produce medical components via 3D printing?
Sure.
All right, let me take that one, Ray. So as far as our powder production capabilities are concerned, Carpenter has a long history of producing metal powders. We started in the 70s, and we essentially consume majority of the metal powders that we produce for developing our micro melt product lines. Which essentially are, produced via powder metallurgy through the hipping process and then pot rolled and finished into a wrought product. We do produce powders for additive printing applications. Now, as far as printing medical devices are concerned, we don't have any plans on being a contract manufacturer or producing components that go into medical devices as of yet, and we don't have any plans to enter that space either. Okay, next question we have is a couple of questions on BIODOR 108. So in the 108 slide, you mentioned nickel-free. What does nickel-free specifically mean? What is the maximum nickel content in that alloy? And as an add-on, is BIODOR 108 currently recognized by EU MDR? Are there any negatives to consider when using BIODOR 108 for material to be used in implantable devices? Rick,
Sure.
you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, yeah, there's a lot in there. You know, I'm not sure who asked this question, but you're obviously very familiar with the alloy. Very astute question. So if you look at the data sheet for BIODOR 108, that will point to 0.1% max. But, and again, we're talking nickel content, not cobalt content. But with respect to nickel, we do offer also a 0.05% nickel max variant of that product as well. Again, these are maxes, they're not targets. They're residual nickel contents in the virgin elemental additions, and certainly we limit that, but it's not possible to ever get to zero in any element that we work with, right? So I say essentially free, and yes, it is very low, but it's not zero. So typically 0.05% is what we would be working to as a max. And that would support the nickel sensitivities as well as the cobalt concerns of EU MDR. Now, you had mentioned recognition of EU MDR of this particular alloy. I would say, you know, when it comes to EU MDR, it is a multifaceted regulatory requirement for many materials, and it's about getting a product approved either through data or you know, looking at some of the attributes of that particular design and leveraging history. But ultimately, you know, this particular product is highly focused on minimizing the regulatory requirements for that particular cobalt concern. Again, that was one of the items that was highlighted in the 2017 update to the EU MDR. So I wouldn't say that any materials are highlighted by EU MDR regulation. They aren't a body that's pushing suggestions to anyone. They are more building a framework around the regulatory, device regulations. And an alloy like BIODOR 108 is going to be a material that would have you know, compliance with some of the cobalt restrictions, as opposed to being you know, highlighted by an EU MDR. So I don't know if that answers your question, but you know, I think that's you know, that's how it is with the EU MDR. They're not going to be pointing towards particular materials.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So just to quickly add on to that, right? I mean, EU MDR, you know, it's a regulatory body. It's a regulatory requirement. They don't essentially have a list of, you know, materials that they approve or recommend. That onus is on the medical device OEMs. What EU MDR essentially talks about is specific elements and requirements around those elements to be compliant, which specifically includes cobalt. And they have a limit of cobalt in there, which is 0.1 weight%. So, you know, if you're talking specifically about BIODOR 108, which has less than 0.1 weight% cobalt, it should be it should meet the EU MDR regulatory requirements as such. And then, you know, you also get a low nickel alloy to work with, right? So you're essentially addressing nickel and cobalt allergies, both in one alloy product family. Let's move on to the next question. Can you describe the work hardening characteristics of 821 compared to 420? Seems there's a lot of interest in 821 here. Ray, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So 821 is, again, a new to world alloy. And I will be very clear and to the point on this one. We don't have a cold working rate developed yet for 821. This material has been designed on the bar side to be leveraged as a through hardenable or carburizable or nitridable material, and how we're attaining the strength characteristics of that particular product has been through those methodologies. So as far as advancing material characteristics through cold working, that has not been explored. If the question is more based in formability, how do we form the product as opposed to what strengths can we attain through cold working, I will say I have been incredibly surprised on the formability of this product. We have done some testing as far as bending the product, and we have bent this product in areas and to levels that are just unbelievable for a straight martensitic product, and it retains very good levels of elongation. If there are specific details you'd like, we can certainly talk about that. Reach out to me in outside of this webinar, but I will say we're in the 20 and 30% elongation in a straight martensitic material. And in some of our bend tests on our flat rolled product, we've bent this product over 60 degrees and a lot of spring back in that particular application, which in a typical straight martensitic, you would fail. And that product was already heat treated. So very, very interesting. Well, I don't want to say preliminary data because we are producing the alloy, but we'll say early onset data when we're starting to investigate some of these properties, how it responds from a toughness and ductility standpoint compared to straight martensitic standard material like 420. Again, I'd be happy to work with you and get more specifics because I don't know the exact question, but feel free to reach out to me afterwards. And I believe the next slide will have my contact information on it.
Yeah. Another one for you, Ray, and this is more pertaining towards melting. Can you explain again how Carpenter minimizes cobalt content in metals? You mentioned, cobalt comes along with nickel. However, nickel is an element of most stainless steels. Therefore, if you have nickel, you have cobalt. So how do you control this in quality control?
Absolutely. Again, very astute question. So we at Carpenter own the decision-making when it comes to not only the melting process, but where our source material comes from. And that can be different levels of purity from the constituents in which we add. So yes, typically nickel and cobalt come along for the ride, but there are also different levels of purity when it comes to a nickel addition. Say, for example, we're producing a 8 to 14% nickel material like a 316 LVM or Biodor 316 LS. To minimize the cobalt content, we need to look at premium raw material elemental additions in that melt. So we cannot source from leftover scrap from a standard 316. We can't get revert from other entities on the available market, right? We need to leverage premium virgin raw material to support the melt of that, or internally our own Biodor 316 LS scrap stream. But ultimately, that is how we're able to control it, because we own that decision on the very early stage of the elemental buildup of that particular blend. And then from there, we can leverage that to many of these different alloy systems, and that's how we're able to keep that very controlled by controlling the elemental addition, whether it be for a 465 or a 316 LS. Where really it all comes down to that original melt control and premium raw materials.
Yeah. Another question to go along with that. Medical devices are heavily regulated. Any change may require re-verification, re-registration. Does Carpenter provide a replacement roadmap to replace cobalt impurity, commonly stainless alloys, such as 304, 316, 420, with a cobalt-free substitute to minimize re-verification, re-registration activities? Example, some physical and biocompatible properties. Okay, let me take that one. So, if a medical device application currently is using, something like 304 or 316 or 420 as the question mentioned, there is an opportunity here to actually source the same alloy with the same chemistry, but more so in a low cobalt version, right? So you're essentially not changing anything from a material perspective, from a regulatory perspective. It still complies to the same ASTM standard. It will still give you the properties you need, with respect to mechanicals, ductility, fatigue. It will meet all of those requirements that you already have justified in the 401k submission. Now, the only change you get is a much tighter control over cobalt. And that is something that we do on our end, as Ray just mentioned, where we use, a significantly better scrap stream to control the amount of interstitials. And that is the way we can limit the amount of cobalt that's coming in. But from an applications perspective, from a regulatory perspective, you are essentially getting the same product that you were using before, where in some cases, if the product could contain more than 0.1% cobalt, now there is a guarantee that it will not. So that's the short answer to that question. If there are any additional concerns about this, please feel free to shoot out an email. If there is specific application requirement, we can definitely provide support to go along with any device submission or any regulatory submission.
Yeah, to expand upon that just for a moment, when it comes to these different alloys, and say for example 17-4, right? 17-4 is an alloy we offer with restricted cobalt as well, because it's an alloy that's used so much in the medical market from an instrumentation standpoint. Just to build off of what Gaurav had said, the UNS number would stay the same. The ASTM specifications, or even AMS specifications, or ISO specifications for these particular alloys would be identical, right? Historically, in these specifications, there was not a call for any cobalt restriction. So there was not a limit, and there was not a purposeful addition. So it was outlined as a unspecified element. So you can look in other specifications that speak to unspecified elements, and historically, we collectively as a community would have worked to that when it comes to cobalt content. Now, when we talk about cobalt restriction and EU MDR on these particular alloys that we're offering with restricted cobalt, again, we are producing the same product when it comes to any of the previously approved materials you're talking about. Certainly, of course, the list that we had earlier, but now with a restricted cobalt. So most of the cobalt restrictions are not defined in any of the specifications, with the exception of a select few. So as you shift in including those specifications, or AMS, ASTM, ISO shifts towards restricted cobalt in these particular specifications, that would come along for the ride, new revisions, right? But the material itself has not changed. Again, same mechanical properties, same expectations, same UNS numbers, and really the same targets that we've worked to historically with respect to type analysis. I'll leave it at that.
Yep. Okay. Maybe a couple of more questions. So, does Carpenter offer consulting services with metallurgists? You know, we are a medical device OEM, and we have some specific issues with specific products that we've worked with our suppliers on, and we need more advanced help and knowledge. You know, could Carpenter assess and provide support? Thank you for the great presentation. So Ray and I, do you want to take this one? All right, Ray, go for it.
Yeah, so that very much is my role at Carpenter, is to be a boots on the ground technical support to customers, and I am the medical SME, so subject matter expert when it comes to medical. So absolutely, we are here to support when it comes to technical, both proactive and reactive, and feel free to reach out to me direct if you feel more comfortable with email. My email address is on the screen. Also, my direct cell phone number is on the screen. But absolutely, when it comes to technical support, feel free to reach out to me. I support medical OEMs on design, application, and alloy alternatives, as well as support to contract manufacturers and tiered suppliers on understanding maybe the changes that are coming with these materials and how they may machine differently or form differently, as well as you know, manufacturing challenges, fabricability challenges. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to support.
Great. Okay. A quick one. So to clarify, alloys with cobalt over 0.1% are non-compliant. Are not non-compliant. It needs a warning label. Is that correct? Yes. So essentially,
equal to 0.1.
Yeah, exactly, right? So when we talk about non-compliance with EU MDR, the purportedly reported limit is equal to or less than or higher than 0.1%, right? And that's the line in the sand that we have with EU MDR. Now, again, for specific applications, there are alloys that contain more than 0.1% cobalt. Say, for instance, CCM, right? Cobalt chrome molybdenum alloy that contains more than 0.1% cobalt. And there are really no alternatives or very few alternatives available in the marketplace to be able to substitute that alloy. So in such cases, there is a provision where OEMs have to actively justify the continued use of such alloys, and at the same time have a warning label on the packaging that lists out that that particular device is a carcinogen, is a mutagenic toxin, and is a reproductive toxin, which is a fairly difficult warning label to put on a box, is the feedback that we've received from a lot of OEMs. So in cases where there really are no alternatives or very few alternatives, and where, you know, OEMs have to justify the continued use of these of cobalt containing alloys, they have to. You know, there's not much they can go around with. But in cases where there are alternatives, there is a very strong interest in either procuring low cobalt versions of the alloys that they're already using, or looking at alternative options, you know, that can potentially meet their application needs. Okay, last one, and this again is one of our newer products. This is the first time I'm hearing of custom 470 stainless. Is this something new, or has it been used before? Well, it's been out there for quite some time. Ray, you want to talk more about custom 470?
Sure. So custom 470, as you mentioned there, Gaurav, it has been around for quite some time. It has a slightly higher sulfur content than standard 465. As I mentioned before, it's produced by a powder melting. So again, a product where we can get a very fine grain size, and it allows us for a material that has enhanced machinability. And I say enhanced because I don't want to say it's free machining. The sulfur content that we add is very small, but we're able to distribute that throughout the product to a point where toughness and strength and ductility still remains high, but it allows for improved machinability of very small features. This has been used in the past throughout the medical market in needles and very small components where, again, small features are important. And again, I know we're coming up here on the time, so there is a data sheet available for the on our website for this alloy. And if you'd like to read up on it a bit more, or if you'd like, feel free, again, reach out to me direct after the webinar. But this particular alloy, again, has found its home in small, fine-featured components and has been around for some time. So again, just trying to bring awareness to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I think we are at time. So again, just to reiterate, if you guys have any questions, regarding EU MDR or low-cobalt alloys or any metal products that Carpenter can produce for your applications in general, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is there on the slide. And thank you for the participation. I'll hand it over to Dan.
Thank you so much, Gaurav and Ray. That was an excellent presentation. We appreciate you sharing your perspective and expertise. I also want to thank our attendees. I hope you took away valuable and insightful information. You can learn more about Carpenter Technology at carpentertechnology.com. With that, I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.